The thing that Aaron Winter taught me, and this phrase is burned into my head, is he said, only the copywriter truly knows how hot the stove is. Meaning that you're going to have all these people in these organizations that think they know, oh, this is the product that we should sell. This is how we should sell it, blah, 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 blah. And this is not just to say that they're not smart. Quite often with the clients that I work with, I'm deferring to them because they have so much deep understanding of the market and things like that. But what Aaron meant with that saying is that ultimately at the end of the day, sales is really hard, and you have to kind of take those lickings to understand how hard it is and to sort of see through some of those barriers. And really that's what a copywriter is doing, is just taking the beatings and touching the hot stove and then being like, oh, here's why that thing didn't work, or here's why this thing has a better shot of working.
All right, welcome to today's VidTao podcast. This is VidTao Co-Founder Ian Nagy, and today we have Mr. Dan Ferrari on our show. So Dan is really one of the top direct response copywriters working today. He's been behind many of the top direct response offers, brands like Motley Fool, many others. And there's actually a big poll polling where they surveyed most of the top direct response copywriters in 2022. Dan was the number one ranked copywriter. And amazing mind and really great guy. You're going to learn a ton about direct response copywriting in this episode, straight from Dan. So really can't wait to share it with you. So let's dive in. This podcast is brought to you by VidTao.com. VidTao is our free YouTube ad library and spy tool, research tool. It's VidTao.com. At VidTao, we have close to 1 million unlisted YouTube video ads that you can search, find, discover how they're doing on a day-by-day basis, so you can really see what ads your competitors are running, see ads in different markets that you can model to create new winning ads for yourself, and a whole lot more. It's all there inside vidtao.com. Plus, we have a premium edition. So the database is free to access, but then we also have a premium edition where you have full unlimited access to the database. And inside there, we also provide training. So we also run an agency called Inceptly. That's INCEPTLY, Inceptly.com, where we've managed over $150 million on YouTube. It's a video traffic agency, and we've worked with everyone from brands like Descript.com, Huel, to real scrappy direct response, info products, supplements, health, beauty, e-commerce, you name it, we've done it. And love sharing what we've learned. Every week we drop new training in there, everything from YouTube ad media buying to running e-commerce creatives on YouTube to hardcore tracking and attribution tutorials to really level up your data science game for advertising and everything in between. Right now, as we speak, we're working on a training regarding YouTube Shorts. Hopefully we'll be live by the time you hear this. On and on and on. This is our passion, is video advertising, and we want to share it with you inside of VidTao Premium. And actually right now, for a limited time, you can get access to VidTao Premium for a very special price. So if you go to vidtao.com, sign up for free, check out the database, upgrade to Premium for this very special price, you'll get access to all of the database and all the trainings. And also wanted to add that at Inceptly, we do free brainstorm calls with clients like you. So if you ever want to get help or ask questions about your YouTube ads, your video traffic on other platforms, we're available to chat. Just go to inceptly.com/call, CALL, and set up a time to chat. It's free and would love to speak with you. Our team's waiting to speak with you. So without further ado, let's get into the show. I think there's this like best copywriters of 2022. Someone made a list. I forget who made the list or whatever.
Peter Zemes.
So Peter, it was brilliant marketing for Peter. But I remember
such a good idea. It just went so viral.
Because people got upset, they got upset, but I didn't hear anyone get upset that you were number one. That's the thing. Like people are like, yeah, all right, Dan's number one. Respect, like gotta respect that.
Yeah, no haters yet, I guess. I don't know.
So, and I know, like I've talked to, Mike Abramov. He speaks extremely highly of you as a teacher as well, and as just a a leader on those kinds of like marketing SWAT team or special ops type situations. But how did it all get, how did it all get started, man? How did you first get into copywriting and get to the point where, now you take on these select assignments in between traveling the world and living in Hawaii and everything else?
Well, this whole conversation is going to come full circle because surfing is really the reason. So the longer version of that incredibly short answer that I just gave you is, so I grew up in Virginia, not even Virginia Beach or anything like that, like landlocked Virginia. But my dad grew up in Long Island. He was sort of one of those early vanguard surfers in the mid 60s and stuff. And he has all these cool stories about, it's kind of like back in my day, we didn't have shoes, we were walking to school barefoot in the snow. It's like, back in my day, we didn't have all this forecasting and things like that. We just got in the car and drove. And if we saw another car coming towards us with surfboards on the roof, we'd stick our hand out the window like this, and then they would go like this or this to let us know how it was. So anyway, my dad surfed, and he would put us in the water on vacation and things like that. So even though it wasn't something that I did a lot when I was little, it was something that I loved when I was little, and was always, I suppose, in the subconscious of like probably inevitable that I would find a way to really pursue it. So then I went to school in Virginia, graduated, and was working in Washington, D.C. for 5-ish years after college. And that hunger started to get a little bit more intense. My brother was living in San Diego at the time, so I'd go out there and surf with him. And, I was just always thinking about what would happen or what would be the next thing. And this is financial crisis timing. 2008, 2009 is when I started my career. It also happened to be kind of the aftermath of that is when a lot of this digital nomadism started up, like something big happens and then a whole new cultural phenomenon happens. And that happened to be digital nomadism and 4-hour work week and all that. So I started to get kind of pulled into those blogs and reading all that. And of course I read Tim Ferriss's stuff and really had no idea about any of it. It was just, probably casually perusing, which is kind of funny because that's sort of the person who I end up speaking to most often in my copy is people who are kind of casually perusing for some sort of solution. So anyway, I had kind of stumbled into some stuff about SEO, which I think was pretty big at the time. By this time, it's probably like 2010-ish. And was really just dead set on moving to Hawaii at that point because my uncle had built a really nice house on Maui, like 5 minutes away from Ho'okipa, right on the water. And we came out here for a family reunion, and I guess that was 2009, 2010. And before going to Maui, I stopped here on Oahu and was just like, yep, this is it. Gonna live here. It took 2 hours for me to make that decision, to be completely honest. So, there's all these things kind of happening in my life where I start to put some of the pieces together, like, oh, okay, there's this whole thing where people are making livings online. Hawaii is now calling to me. That drive to surf had gotten quite a bit more intense. And, sidebar, like life in DC was not bad. I was not one of these people that's like, I gotta get the fuck out of here. I hate this shit. It was just, it wasn't for me. I had a really good job at the time, but it just wasn't for me. So then, I'm in all these digital nomad blogs and things like that. And I start to read about this guy named Tommy Schultz, who I'm sure you could Google. And he was big in like the tropical MBA community at the time. But incidentally had also gone to the University of Virginia like me. And what he was doing was he was making a living as a surf photographer in Bali. Mm-hmm. So I got super interested in that story, of course. And this is really serendipitous that by that time I had already bought a one-way ticket to move to Hawaii and had given my job notice. I was like, look, I'm going to be out of here in a couple of months. And I gave them plenty of notice. And I gave myself plenty of time to like figure it out. So anyway, it's probably 2 months before that one-way ticket. And I emailed this guy, Tommy Schultz. I was just thinking, I realize this is a shot in the dark, but is there any way you could like give me some advice on how you made all of your dreams come true, basically? And this is why it's very serendipitous, because it was probably 2 weeks before Christmas at that time. And his parents and my parents are basically next towns over. So he had come all the way back from Bali and was literally like 30 minutes away from me at this time. And he said, why don't we go get lunch together?
Nice.
So, I mean, this is just complete graciousness on his part. And if he listens to this somehow, I hope that he realizes that I'm very much indebted to him, because we went to that lunch and he just was talking to me and giving me his own story. And I was telling him, yeah, I want to move to Hawaii and make my own hours and surf, like I said, like this is where I was at the time. I didn't fabricate or embellish any of that story. And he was the first one to mention copywriting to me. Basically, he said, well, if you really want to do all that, you should look into copywriting, because it's, even at that time, now it's 2000. I moved here in 2012. So this is late 2011. So even at that time, it was very remote. There was quite a bit of opportunity to do freelance work, basically on your own. Whatever Upwork was, Upwork is now whatever it was then. That's Elance or freelance or whatever. So you could really start to actually do some of this. I mean, nothing like there is now. Facebook communities, coaching programs, and all of that. But it was possible. So he lays all that out for me. And I'm sitting here thinking, well, I really like to write. That was always something I had liked to do. I have a degree in marketing, so I'm sure I could figure it out. And most importantly, it's going to allow me to make this escape. So I was in. That was all. I had no idea what he was talking about, right? Like, we get, slowly boiled frog to get the realization of what all of this stuff is. But at that moment, it was very mind-blowing, and I didn't really care what the details were. So fast forward maybe 6 months, because I was still working that other job and I was on contract, but I had moved out here. And so I was working remotely for them. And basically when that contract ended, I left that job and was like, all right, now I'm a freelance copywriter and I got to figure this whole thing out. So
yeah,
I was just in Starbucks every night after work leading up to that, studying Dan Kennedy, doing all this kind of initiation. And then as soon as that job ended, I still had no idea what I was doing, but I had read a couple books. And so I went on Elance, I guess it was, and just started posting like, hey, copywriter per hour. And somehow I managed to figure it all out. I actually had a kind of a sad moment the other day, because there's a lot of development going on in my area here. And the Starbucks that I primarily went to at that time, because it was open late, I think it was open till 11 p.m. So I could go, I'd surf all day and do whatever work I had to do. And then I'd go study at night at that Starbucks. And they're about to knock it down because they're building a high-rise condo there. So a little bit sad, but that's the way it goes.
They're going to put a plaque there. This is the Starbucks.
Yeah, this
Dan
is where
Ferrari.
my career started.
Oh, that's so cool.
Does that answer your question about the genesis of it all?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I love it. I love I can smell the coffee grinds, because I think like that gotta respect Starbucks as being sort of like the community study lounge for so many people, like, who got to start in marketing and were, voraciously hand copying all these things.
Well, you want to know what's funny, about just coffee and Starbucks in general. So that whole period I was living in Washington, D.C. was a very kind of standard 9-to-5 office culture where people are just downing coffee by the gallon, right? But I had never had a cup of coffee at all that whole time. And it wasn't until I needed a place to go to get some of this work done, and therefore was at Starbucks quite a bit, where I just remember one day being like, I should probably try this stuff out. But I was just drinking tea the whole time, right? And so I had a cup of coffee, and I kid you not, within probably 5 days, I was hooked, like just a full on coffee drinker. So, now these days, I mean, even right now I have some notes where I'm always like taking ideas down. Like I'm sort of like, can I start a local Hawaii based coffee collective and just have it be local coffees, people here that are sort of high income, maybe even meeting and paying like a premium for tastings and things like that. So, it's funny, like the marketer in me is always like, this thing is so addicting. I personally have experienced that, right? Like here I am. And what's the business that I can do out of that? Because I love coffee now.
Yeah.
And it's like this thing that I never would have discovered if it wasn't for coffee or copywriting.
That's so funny. Yeah. That's crazy. Probably supercharged your studying efforts too at the time on a whole nother level. Yeah. The original nootropic.
It's so good.
That's awesome. And then so basically, so you started to get some gigs on Elance, on whatever Upwork was back then. And then when did you get your first hardcore direct? When did you write your first sales letter? Do you remember that?
Oh man, I don't know if this was the first one, but in that period, because I remember sitting outside of that Starbucks had like a nice little outside area, and at night it was quite nice to work out there. And I remember writing this thing on that patio. It was a paleo eating diet plan type thing. That was like the first real sort of direct response long form thing that I can remember. Was it the very first? I don't know. But I do remember that one as being like, oh, I sort of understand what's going on here. And I remember that one also being so early on in that time frame. I ended up working with this guy, Joe, who had a pretty extensive direct marketing background. And, he knew all these people like John Carlton and Gary Bencivenga, and it was really mind blowing to me at the time. And he put something up on Upwork at that time, and I sent him that letter, and I remember him being like, wow, this is very good. If you can bring this type of quality to the stuff that I want to do with you, then you're really going to have a future. He was the first guy to put me on retainer and all that. So that letter, I guess, was sort of a little bit of a breakthrough for me.
Nice. Yeah. That was like a text sales letter, video sales letter. Just curious what it was.
It was all text.
Nice.
Man, I think the name of the company was Paleo Flip or something. I don't know. I could dig it out of my archives. It's probably in my hard drive somewhere.
That's some early paleo days, 2012. That's like, that's early adopter paleo style. That's super cool.
That's actually funny to think about that. You said that, like, wow, they really were on the vanguard. I wonder what happened to them.
Yeah.
Could have nailed it.
Seriously. Who knows? Maybe they're behind. They're the global paleo conspiracy. They run. They pull the strings behind every paleo offer now. Yeah. So I'm just curious, one thing that I think is really interesting about, and the thing is, like, I've known about the stuff that you've done, and everyone speaks so highly of all your work. And also I know that there's a lot of stuff that you've done that I don't even know that you've done. You know what I mean? Like, I think a lot of,
some of that's by design.
Yeah, I understand that. It makes a lot of sense in that way. But I'm really curious, I know one of the things that's really impressive is also your ability to mentor. So I've talked to several of your mentees and people you've collaborated with in sort of like a copy chief type of capacity, and they just speak volumes of how they've developed. In addition to obviously the results that the collaborative work that you've done together has been. I'm just curious, when did you start getting into that sort of not being like a lone wolf, but more about having like a pack of beasts and like running that? Just curious how that progression happened.
I think it probably happened on two different tracks that have kind of coincided over recent years. So the one is, fast forward a few years from that 2012 framework, and I meet Aaron Winter, who was my copy chief at the Motley Fool. We do a bunch of work there for a couple of years, and then he says, "Hey, do you want to start this agency with me?" I was like, "Yeah, you're teaching me so much. I'd be a fool not to latch my wagon to yours and see where it would go. So at the very beginning of that thing, we were just writing financial copy, and it was really me, Aaron. We had a COO/account guy who kind of managed all the day-to-day business pieces of dealing with the clients. And then we had another copywriter who was also a Motley Fool guy. But at that time, things started going really well. And we started being like, oh, we should probably A, diversify out of writing just financial copy, but B, bring in some new people that we can start to develop. And so that's where Ning and Mike Abramoff and Austin Lee were sort of the first three people who kind of went through that recruiting funnel, if you want to call it that, and ultimately wound up sort of under my purview, I think in a lot of ways, because there's just a lot of similar interests in those guys. They all live in California, and so they were geographically a little bit easier for me to deal with from Hawaii. And then they like to surf, and we have a lot in common. And then probably most importantly, they all were capable of writing outside of financial niche at the time. And so that's really where we started to kind of bring in some outside clients doing supplements and health publishing and stuff along those lines. And that's really where I started to work very intently with them. Ning and Austin came out here and did sort of like a tutelage in Hawaii. And then Mike and I have been collaborating on stuff probably more than any other person. Actually, Mike and I have worked together for years and years and years. So that's sort of the one track. And then the other track was, I don't know, maybe I was a little bit on the vanguard in this regard, because I think around 2016, I was like, I think there's probably room for high-end coaching. And I don't think there was a lot of high-end copy coaching at the time, at least in a group setting. I think some people were probably doing one-on-one stuff. And I said, I could probably do 4 or 5 people at a time and just have kind of this little pod of people that I'm training and who are doing great work. And that thing, I sort of just put it out there as a little bit of a, let's see what happens here. And that must have been 2017. So here we are 5.5 years later, and it's never grown. I have people will tell me oh, you can scale this thing, whatever. But, I get to work very, very personally with 4 or 5 writers at a time, very intimately get to know them. They have my phone number, we're texting things. I have text on my phone right now from these guys. And that's the way I like it, where I can be more or less their backstop for whatever they need. So I have no intentions of scaling it, but it's been cool to see how it has really sort of become a little bit of this mythical thing, because we don't market it. We don't talk about it. I fill it almost entirely from people who are on a wait list. They'll message me and say, hey, I'm interested in this thing you're doing. And so it is a little bit of a mystical place, and we get kind of mystical results. And it's been just a really nice thing that has been a wonderful part of my career that I never expected. And it's very gratifying. That's probably the reason why I do it, and why, even though there's way more money to scale it and things like that, I don't, because it's very gratifying for me to be so close to these guys and to have those handful of very small relationships that usually last for years. I'm usually working with these guys for years. And so I can literally see their lives changing, buying homes, starting families, being able to give their kids more than they had. So yeah, it's great. But probably more to your point, it has taught me a ton about the nuances of the craft and how the easiest ways to sort of break it down into little pieces that make it simpler. And I think that that's the thing, right? Is there's so much out there in the world of direct response, and there's so much out there in the world of how to market directly to consumers. And when you sit down and try and do it, it can be really overwhelming, right? It can just be this massive thing, I got to have risk reversal, and I have to get their attention, and don't forget, is the offer created correctly? And there's just all these things. And when you are in those first stages, right? When I'm writing that first paleo long form letter, you're like, holy hell, how do I keep track of all this? And that's a feeling that I personally have related to quite a bit before I kind of was like, all right, I'm just going to take all this stuff and try and boil it into these simple mental models. And that's what I try and give these guys is like, okay, that thing that you're talking about, plus those other 7 things that we talked about 5 minutes ago, they're actually all just this one thing. Mm-hmm. And if we can take just a handful of these one things as really universal principles, and then teach ourselves how to think critically about how those universal principles show up in all those other things, it makes the process easier, it makes it smoother, it makes the results better, and most importantly, like it makes you not want to hate the craft. And I think for a lot of writers in particular long form writers, there is this period where you're like, okay, I like this thing and I like this process and I like writing, but oh man, sometimes it gets really, really tough. And I think there's probably some sort of famous saying about writers, cut themselves and bleed all over the page. And it can be true. And so I think quite a lot of the approach that I've taken is, how do we remove all of that? So A, that the joy is there, but B, when the joy is there, that's when typically you're thinking about it in a better place and where your head is in a place where it's actually going to start flowing and working nicely. And so ultimately it's easier, but it gets you better results too. And I think that that's pretty great.
That's awesome. I imagine, the question that comes to mind is, you must have seen some pretty amazing transformations, talking about someone coming in on day 0, day 1, where maybe you're thinking, okay, all right, let's see if we can, work with this. And then, looking back months later, seeing where they're at. Does anyone come to mind? You don't have to name names. I'm just curious about that.
Well, certainly the one that really comes to mind is Robert Bennett, and I don't think he would mind me saying his name. So when Robert is now probably one of the best BizOp copywriters there is. He wrote that inbound closer promo that Traffic and Funnels ran for $100,000 a day or something like that, something insane. So that's where he has risen to, and he's gone on since then to do quite a bit of things. We're actually collaborating on some projects at the moment. So that's how much I trust him and believe in his skills. When he came to me, he was writing broadcast emails for Chris Evans and Taylor Welch that were so suboptimal that they wouldn't even publish them.
Really?
And so we've gone from the place where the broadcast emails of 300 words aren't good enough to probably one of the most in-demand freelancers around, especially in that industry, in that particular BizOp type framework. So yeah, that's probably the one that comes to mind. And just not just the results, but his maturity as a writer, his ability to think through problems and to think through all the stuff that happens before you're on the page, right? That's where I spend so much time with these guys is look, you're a copywriter, but the thing that Aaron Winter taught me, and this phrase is burned into my head, is he said, only the copywriter truly knows how hot the stove is. Meaning that you're going to have all these people in these organizations that think they know, oh, this is the product that we should sell. This is how we should sell it, blah, 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 blah. And this is not just to say that they're not smart. Quite often with the clients that I work with, I'm deferring to them because they have so much deep understanding of the market and things like that. But what Aaron meant with that saying is that ultimately at the end of the day, sales is really hard. And you have to kind of take those lickings to understand how hard it is and to sort of see through some of those barriers. And really that's what a copywriter is doing, is just taking the beatings and touching the hot stove and then being like, oh, here's why that thing didn't work, but here's why this thing has a better shot of working. So with all those guys, I'm really teaching them about thinking through marketing on a strategic level, thinking through offers, thinking through not just offers, but what does this mean for the business? And so to see not only their writing improve, but to see their ability to basically run anything they want to do in a marketing function. They could be a CMO, they could do optimizations. These are all things that ultimately we spend a lot of time talking about because they inform the copywriting function. But probably back to my other point is when you have this really tight understanding of just the fundamentals and the frameworks and the very few mental models that I think you need to know to understand this business, which is all about leverage, you can go apply that anywhere to any context, in any problem, any solution that you need, you can find. And that really, to me, is what's great about now. I've worked with, I don't know, 20 of these guys or whatever, and to see how they're all in all different places. Some of them are pretty, dyed in the cloth long form copywriters. Some of them are running email lists now. Some of them are in CRO positions. Some of them are CMOs, and that's really cool. That you can use copywriting as a bit of a Trojan horse into the rest of the marketing function if you want, right? And that's the important part. If you want, I wouldn't say any of it's right or wrong.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I mean, the idea of, you talk a lot about just strategy over tactics and frameworks, and thinking in terms of the offer. And I'm wondering what kind of frameworks, when you look at a new offer, are there any frameworks that you sort of default to as, your first port of call when trying to kind of understand an offer at first glance?
Yeah. You could make this as complicated or as uncomplicated as you want. And the most uncomplicated thing that I'm always asking is just who's buying this, right? And there's a lot of different answers to that question. But if it's a $50 initial purchase, that's a whole different structure and a whole different framework of what an offer should be than a $5,000 subscription service. Right. So that's kind of the first place that I'm always asking myself is who's buying this? What price point are they buying it at? And then you can start to unpack all of these things. Like I said, I have a traditional marketing background, and in a traditional academic setting, they teach you the 4 Ps of marketing, which I don't even fully remember. It's price, packaging, promotion, and position. And a lot of that is in a very sort of traditional retail context. What is the actual package? What is the position on the shelves and things like that? But I have always thought for a more performance marketer or direct consumer marketer, direct response marketer, price is still completely accurate, right? Like that's something that you have to really take into account because it's going to change a lot. You have to sell differently and you have to justify a higher price point, to be frank. Positioning, I mean, we are not talking about physical positioning inside of store shelves, but how you position the offer, how you frame the offer relative to the rest of the market, but also just relative to this person's sort of day-to-day life and how they're looking at it in the context of everything else that they have. I consider that positioning. I do think you could still apply packaging because, I mean, in a very literal context, at some point, whether it's a physical product, a supplement, or an info product, you're going to want to show them some sort of physical thing to represent your product, even if it's information. But I think packaging in the frameworks that we're familiar with really includes all of the features and bonuses and things like that, and how you're putting them together into hopefully a coherent package, or at least a coherent bundle that maybe has a couple things that aren't necessarily completely related, right? Like it doesn't all have to be related. Quick little sidebar. Like I've been reading this book, which is this like classic direct mail book. And the thing that he keeps coming back to on a lot of this is, hey, they're testing pricing and stuff nonstop. But they're also testing all the freebies and bonuses and premiums. And a few times in here, he's been like, yeah, and that thing was completely unrelated to what we were selling, but ended up being the best bonus that we offered. That's a little sidebar, but all of that stuff, bonuses, freebies, and then just even the way that you're packaging the main product. What are the promises it makes? What are the claims that you're going to wrap around that? I think that all applies to packaging too. And then of course you have your promotion and how you're going to actually put it out into the world, I think is pretty important. So yeah, we like to kind of hate on traditional marketers or traditional advertising, but there is some overlap. They're not completely dumb. Like it's just books everywhere. A lot of it traces back to this guy.
Such a good one. Yeah.
Is a brand advertiser, but also a direct response marketer. And if you really trace the history of the whole business, is kind of at Ogilvy and Bensavanga and some of these guys who worked in the big advertising agencies, that's sort of where this divergence happened. So prior to all those guys, it's all the same, right? The big advertisers are direct response advertisers, and then there's that little split, but a lot of that heritage is still there. So there's plenty to be learned from traditional advertising, in my opinion.
Yeah, on that note, I think I was listening to a podcast you were on, and you were talking about begun to do some forays into the non D2C space. I'm just curious, how that's been going.
That must have been a short-lived one, because I can't even remember what that would have been. Yeah. Well, a lot of this is what interests you.
Mm-hmm.
The B2B doesn't really interest me. But if you're a freelancer particularly, or if you're trying to be more of a consultant or an advisor, agency owner, whatever, like basically if you're not your own founder, even if you're trying to kind of like move your way into equity positions, you have to sort of understand the B2B piece of it too, right? I sent a huge proposal out yesterday. That's B2B marketing.
Mm-hmm.
That's Aaron Winter calls it enterprise copywriting, because it is generally one-to-one for people in the situations where you're trying to close a new client or get a new partnership off the ground or whatever. But it is in effect a B2B proposition, because you're telling them how you're going to improve their business. So as much as I don't really do it kind of as the exercise of my craft, I think it's something that everyone who's trying to build a business probably has to understand in some extent, because even if you're an offer owner, like, okay, now I'm thinking about this, right? And it's like when I was with Basement Beast, we're always negotiating inventory costs and stuff like that. And even that's a little bit of a B2B type salesman thing, the emails that you send and stuff to that effect. So yeah, everyone should at least think about it.
That's super cool. And then I was just curious about how you approach, let's say you had to build a copy team from scratch.
Ooh.
How would you approach that? Yeah, you're dropped
Very
into
very good question.
Yeah.
And it's a question that I get a lot, actually, because this is sort of something that I think a lot of business owners realize you get better results most of the time from people who are embedded in your business. And I say most of the time because the way that I actually think about it is, if you're going to hire a freelancer, particularly a high-priced freelancer, you're looking for someone that's basically going to come in and break all of your playbook. They're going to just turn the apple cart over and do something completely new. Whereas when you're on a copy team, like, those are people who you need to show up every day. They need to be consistent. They need to be reliable. They need to be autonomous, and they need to basically just be putting consistent stuff that has a good chance of winning out there. So anyway, to answer your question, the shortest reply that I can give you is you build it around the people who you have. And that sounds a little bit like duh, but maybe the people you have is the people that you can get, I suppose. So what I mean by that is, if you go on, let's say I'm a copy chief and I have no one working for me, and I put out a job description or whatever, I'm going to get people at all levels of the experience spectrum, right? I mean, even if I were to say, like, here's very strict rules, like, you're just going to get a dispersion of talents and things, even within any criteria. You can build off of someone who's down here, or you can build off of someone who's up here. If I have someone who's up here and then I'm ultimately above them. Like all I'm trying to do with that person is get them to basically be 80 or 90% self-sufficient so that they can take the brunt of the work. I can place myself on top to do a lot of the stuff that we've talked about already, like make sure that they have all the strategy and the offer, and that we're thinking through the best hooks and mechanisms and approaches. And then that person is good enough to just go off on their own, basically, and then leave me to do the rest of what needs to be done as the copy chief, or even if I'm the CMO or whatever. That person's invaluable. And then once they've reached capacity, then you can start adding people to be under them, or just another one of them, for example. But suppose the opposite that I gave, like you start with somebody down here. It doesn't mean you don't work with them. It doesn't mean that that's not equally as good, because that person may be worthy of dedicating quite a lot of time and investment to, and soon they will be the person up there. And then you've had this model for how to develop someone. They're probably going to be cheaper than the guy who started right up here. So for some businesses, there is an advantage of that, because you can actually start to pay them quite a bit more than what they were paying. You know, it's a win for everyone, basically, is that you can give them way more than they were making in the open market. And then you can actually get them up to the level where you would have been paying somebody else a significant premium if they just came in with all of that skill set on their own. The caveat to what I've just described there is the most important thing you're actually screening for there. Well, the two most important things, one of them I think we've covered, like, is this person capable of developing in the way that I want them to? But that one's an important long-term consideration, because you need that person to be loyal to you. You need them to have at least the eye to stick with you for some time to make your investment into them more or less pay off, right? I have a finance background as well. So a lot of this is sort of looking at, does the cost that goes into the investment justify the return? So me with Aaron is a perfect example. Is Aaron basically started training me in 2014, and we still collaborate on some stuff, but not day to day. But we were working day to day from 2014 until about midway through 2020. So 6.5 years of basically return for him, where the time he spent to train me early on in those 2014 eras, then he was able to enjoy a lot of the upside. And I had no problem with it, because I was making way more money than I would have made without him. I was way smarter than I would have been without him. Everything was easier than it would have been without him, because I was really just chiefing and writing. I didn't have to worry about client development and signing contracts and all that stuff. So it's a very mutual arrangement when you get the right ones. And so you can go top up, you can go bottom down. It's just a matter of recognizing who is worth the time, more or less, and what do you need them for. So unfortunately, there's no defined answers. It's kind of a bespoke sort of thing. But I think once you understand that it's not just the A-listers that have a place or that you want to build a team around, and that for most businesses, there's actually a need for someone at multiple different levels and multiple different price points. And so, right, like there's no judgment, I guess, on how good somebody is, because they're all valuable.
That's super interesting. And like the thing that really jumps out is, you know, obviously you're personally brilliant and you've worked your ass off and you've worked smart, right? And then it's also just so clear that it's all these relationships that you've been able to forge too, that have just been like the sort of, you know, rocket fuel for the whole thing. And the whole, just how everything is so interdependent and built on people and relationships is so clear. So I think that's super cool. And it's not like just, you know, the idea of some kind of isolated genius sitting in a basement, you know, pumping out stuff.
Well, you know, there's a lot to be said for all of that. You know, in a lot of ways, I am kind of a weird dichotomy to what you just said. I do like this sort of being alone, just working in the craft type of stuff. And that's how I form a lot of these relationships. So even with the collaborative stuff between Robert and I, or Mike and I, for example, a lot of the work that I'm doing in those capacities is like, hey, send me what you have, and I'm going to spend the next day looking at it, being by myself deep in the craft, which is what I enjoy doing. And then I'll send it back to you and we can iterate it. But yeah, you have to have all of these relationships for that thing to work out. And then the other thing that I wanted to piggyback off of what you just said is, one, I try not to predict where a relationship is going to go, or I try and keep an open mind about where it's going to go, because, like I said, with a lot of those mentees, you don't know if they're going to come in wanting to focus on this thing, and then their career is going to take them over there, where all of a sudden they're more of an optimizer than a copywriter. And what do you know? You have an opportunity to collaborate with somebody over there. My relationship with Aaron has been, particularly since we really stopped working day to day in 2020, it's gone in all these different directions. Like we've co-invested on private equity deals at this point, and like we're working on all sorts of weird things. But the thing that I was actually keen when you said that is, and I include that with anyone who I'm working for in a client relationship, I think that there's quite a lot of, disparagement that happens along, like, oh, like I just have clients, or I work for clients, or that's my client. And I get it. I really do. But I think it's a little bit short-sighted, because with everyone who I am doing a transactional type thing with, same thing, like I'm not trying to predict where that relationship is going to go. I'm not trying to predict what copywriting jobs I have for them. I'm just trying to see, basically, do I like working with this person? And if the answer to that question is yes, then I start looking at all these other things that are possibilities. Maybe it is only strictly in a client capacity, but in almost every client relationship I have right now, it's moving well beyond, I'm just giving you these copy deliverables. It's, oh, you're working with that phone team. Yeah, they're okay, but they're not really salesmen. They're more of a customer service type thing. So have you thought about working with these guys? If you want to do that, like I can help you set that up and take a piece of it. Or back to the conversion thing. Oh, like this person that I trained has become an incredible conversion rate optimizer. I have this control working for this client that ultimately is going to start to fade, or is going to just need some polishing because there's some low hanging fruit now that we have the data back. Let me connect those people. I can even be over top of this person and have a little bit of the margin of the royalty stream or the fees or the retainer or whatever. And so all of these things start to come together in really nice, streamlined ways. And even for someone like me who does want to be that kind of head down, leave me alone, I'm in the marketing right now, there's a way to do it without giving all of that up, without only managing people. But the only way you can sort of get to the place where you're not managing people is by meeting the people. It's a little bit of a catch-22, but ultimately good people will set you free. And I think what I said there about just don't try and predict where those relationships are going to go, just make them and let them be what they're going to be. Don't force them to be anything other than that. And have the ability, the skill to sort of see all the pieces that you can put together between businesses and providers and yourself. And yeah, it becomes a really nice place to be. And I think a lot of the people who struggle just as freelance copywriters or just as copywriters who don't know where they want to go, it's just kind of open your eyes a little bit to all of the other people that are around you in these different functions, and how can you interact with them, and how can you guys have these very mutually beneficial relationships.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. In terms of, being open to where things are going to go, and just that spirit of open-mindedness, where do you see yourself going the next, say, like 3 years in terms of two areas. First thing
Oh man,
is business,
it's
and then
full of hard questions to.
and then I'll finish on a more another one. I'll surprise question after that.
I think I know what that one's going to be too. But business wise, this year has been sort of a transitional year for me because to continue some of the storytelling. So Aaron and I stopped working together in 2020, and that was all predetermined. When we started doing the agency work, he basically said, I'm going to do this for about 4 years, because at the time he had one young son and now he has a second young son. And he's like, I'm going to do this for a few years, and then basically I'm going to retire so that I can go spend more time with my kids. And that's really what he did. I think he works 1 day a week now. So he held pretty firm to that. But anyway, I knew that was a transitional time for me. And then very coincidentally or serendipitously, at the beginning of 2022, with my eyes on knowing that I was ending that, is kind of when I started working and founding and doing all the beginning pieces of Basement Beast, which was the home fitness thing that I was involved in for a couple of years. And we had the tailwinds of COVID because we started this thing before COVID. I mean, talk about like silver linings, right? But I exited that earlier this year. And so then I was doing all the travel and just starting to think through what I wanted to do, and have been working pretty closely, like I said, with maybe 3 or 4 or 5 clients. Where's all that transition of 2022 going to lead me in 2023 and beyond? It's hard to say. I really like the way that things I'm working on right now are. Like I said, I'm sort of I've referred to it as non-hostile takeovers, where I start these client relationships. They see that we have good things going. I make them a bunch of money right off the bat, hopefully. And then we start to say, where can we take these things? And I'm mature enough, I suppose, at this point in my career where I have my boundaries and my needs and wants all separated, and I can be very distinct about those things. So it's a really nice place to be, and I don't have any real urgency to get out of it. And it's allowing me to pull these mentees that I've spent years working with in a more of a kind of a transactional or like coaching relationship, and then saying, okay, that was great, but now we can even operate as one, which is a whole nother level of intimacy that I enjoy with them. Intimacy might be a weird word for that, but you get the picture.
I get the picture.
All that said, and you saw me mention it already with the Hawaii Coffee Collective or whatever, I always am thinking about, oh, what if I launch this thing, or what if I launch that thing? I'm super fascinated by the prospect of buying basically direct to consumer businesses, whether that's locally here or more online based stuff. That's something that really has kind of piqued my interest quite a bit lately. And like I mentioned, I've done a couple of more like small stake, well, not small, so the money was actually somewhat significant, but I've invested in a couple companies basically just as the investor, right? Like, you go do that thing that you said you're going to do, and then I'll get the return. But more of like a private equity model where you buy something, take a controlling interest, and then grow it. That's very interesting to me at this point. So all that's to say, I think that there's not going to be a whole lot of difference in how I operate in the future to how I've operated over the last few years. Is that I really enjoy freelancing and client work, and I really enjoy expanding those things beyond just the copywriting function. But I also like to launch offers. I like to own things. So I'll probably buy or launch things in the future. And then who knows? Like, I always joke with my friends and my girlfriend that my third career will be actually owning a coffee shop, right? Like, a lot of these things are coming full circle where I can actually talk to the people who come in every day with their laptops and say, what do you, a real small place where it's friendly to digital nomads. And I can say, what are you working on? Oh, that's really interesting. Have you ever thought about this? And then they just keep coming in because they get free business advice as a consequence of buying my coffee.
Full circle. I love that. That's funny. All right. That's yeah, love your answer. Last question. Last question is, all right. So I think it's really impressive how you're approaching surfing. You know, how you're like, you're seriously, you've dedicated a lot of, you're serious about like the craft of copywriting, and it's clear you're serious about the craft of surfing. You're investing in like experiences, coaching, like training, everything.
Yeah.
So where do you see your surfing? Like, what are you working on right now in surfing? And where do you see next 3 years for your surfing trajectory?
Oh man. Well, it's kind of like I said with Aaron, like you find the person and you just latch your wagon to them. So I have my person who is Kahea Hart, who's an incredible coach here in Hawaii, works with people on the professional tour, works with Billy Kemper, who's probably the best big wave surfer in the world. And yeah, I'll just basically follow him wherever he goes, which was Mexico last year. Maybe it'll be someplace else this coming season. And it's funny that you related copywriting to surfing, because to me, they're both kind of infinite games, right? Where the journey is never ending. Quite a lot of the journey should be the reward. But there are these very distinct moments where it's not about the journey. It's just about, okay, I got to the thing that I wanted to get to. And with surfing, that sometimes is a very fleeting moment, like, oh, fuck, like I just figured out how to wrap that turn a little bit tighter. And it's almost this breakthrough moment. And I found the same thing happens with copywriting, particularly when you're first developing, is you sort of bang your head against the wall trying to figure out, like, why doesn't that concept make sense to me? And then it's one project, one page, one sentence, one section that you write it or you read it and you go, okay, that all makes sense now. So I guess that's a roundabout way of saying, I don't know if I have any real desires around surfing other than to just keep improving, to keep enjoying it, and to not push myself so hard that I don't enjoy it anymore. What that looks like specifically, anytime you can get through a winter on the North Shore and emerge in one piece is a victory. I think I got injured the last 2 winters, so hopefully I don't have that happen this winter. And then, yeah, just bringing more style to my surfing. Like Kay and I have spent literally the last 2 years just going over technique, basically. And now that I have techniques down and I'm starting to kind of emerge as more of an intermediate to advanced surfer, which is really hard to do as an adult, by the way. Like you just see these kids and you say to yourself, man, I wish that I had grown up like that. But yeah, now I guess it's all sort of bringing the aesthetics back to it, because I can read the water. I know what my lines should be. I'm pretty comfortable in pretty heavy conditions and pretty variable conditions, and I can squeeze stuff out of small waves. So yeah, it's sort of just looking a little bit more aesthetic and smooth in all those conditions, and just adding more tools to the repertoire, I guess.
Nice. Fantastic.
How about you?
Oh, for me? Oh man, I need to lose about 20 pounds. That's the starting point. For me, yeah, I mean, I guess the main thing is, I would say fundamentals, like I'm realizing, 41 years old, my ankle flexibility is shit. And,
oh man,
and it causes me issues. Like I blow a lot of takeoffs, or even just, I miss like a split second where I could have had an entry point to have a good wave. And all of a sudden I'm behind the section and just, I blow it. So that's been a big.
You should check out functional range conditioning.
Functional range conditioning. All right, I'm going to write that down.
It's a movement philosophy, a mobility philosophy, and it is a lot of work and it can be quite boring. So I don't know if it becomes the foundation of what you do, but what they are very good at is, if you have a particular joint or movement that you're really restricted in, is you could use these fundamentals that they have to just kind of hammer that thing. And it does improve better than probably most other modalities that I've tried, if you're willing to give it some time. Because like you, my ankles have been probably over the last 10 years, I noticed that they got quite a bit tighter. And I tried all sorts of stuff. And this is the first thing that has really sort of yielded returns, and my hips too.
Interesting.
So,
Functional range conditioning.
yeah. And if you're on Instagram, if you just do like hashtag functional range conditioning or go to handle functional range conditioning, I think it is, or maybe it's FRC, but they have a lot of pretty influential people putting out really good content. And then all of those people have, well, not all of them, but quite a few of them have continuity type stuff where they'll do new workouts every week. Or the one that I follow is a guy named Matt Penny. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's like $40 a month. And he gives 5 workouts a week. So one for ankles and elbows, one for hips, one for spine, one for shoulders, and etc.
That's awesome.
So yeah, check them out.
I gotta check that out. I can already feel my thoracic spine opening up there.
Well, then the other one to look into is foundation training, which is really big here in Hawaii because of Kahea, but also Jesse Salas, who's the right-hand man in that whole business, lives here on the North Shore too. And that is the most effective postural fix that I've ever encountered. It's really 10 minutes a day of really sort of isometric positions that has kind of this miraculous effect of, I guess it's rewiring all of your nervous system to be on where it should be on and to be off where it should be off. But yeah, within just a few weeks of doing that for 10 or 15 minutes a day, I started getting comments from people like, oh man, like your posture is great. What do you do? And then that will just allow anything else you do to have faster results. Because if you're, you can go do a functional range conditioning or a foam rolling thing. And then if you're walking all jacked up or you have really poor spinal positions, all of those things are just going to return. So I think if you have foundation training as a way to really sort of make sure that you're starting from a good baseline, you can yield quite a bit more return from any of the other time that you invest in other stuff.
Oh, that's super cool. I got to check that out.
Plus, it's cool that the business has a lot of connections to the surfing world, which I find pretty interesting.
That's great. So it's pretty tailored to getting that kind of result, which is
yeah.
Cool.
The guy who started it, Eric Goodman, he surfs, and then of course Jesse and Kahea are here, and they've just been sort of spreading it through the surfing community now. Where it was funny, I was in El Salvador at a surf camp, and somehow it came up, and the guy was like, "Oh man, like I love foundation training. I love doing Jesse's workouts on the app." And I was like, "Yeah, Jesse's one of my great friends, dude. Like in Hawaii, that thing is everywhere." So it was kind of cool because that guy was from the mainland, to see how they've really started to market themselves well, mostly through great content on social media.
Yeah, I think I've seen that. So they do the thing like this. Is that the?
Yeah.
I've seen that. I was like, what is that? But I noticed. I think I saw that on Kahea's page, and then I think there was like some other Instagram thing I was looking at. That's super cool. I got to check that out. Looks unusual. So, and people are swearing by it. Yeah,
it's a surprisingly hard considering you're not really moving.
It's like some horse stance, like 3.0 type stuff.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah. Awesome. Dan, man, I know, just getting started on your day out there in Hawaii, you're probably going to head over to the North Shore and take another stab
that's the big question for the day is, am I going to go up there? It's a little bit of a combo swell right now, which on the North Shore can make things very hectic. So I don't know. I'll watch the cams and make the decision at some point. But speaking of mobility, I have to be back down here this afternoon because I have an appointment with a guy to do some body work, which I think is an important tool to do once a month or so. So it'd be another thing to check out.
Nice. God, so much knowledge on the marketing front, on the surfing front.
And then that's it. After that, that's all I'm good for.
I doubt that. Well,
it's like that. There's a line in Gary Bensavenga's sales letter for the DVDs, or maybe it's for the bullets. One of those two things that he wrote, where he says like, I'm useless in everything else. I can't even balance a checkbook, but here's the stuff I know. So yeah, like surfing, mobility, and copywriting. That's all you get from me. And then after that, who knows?
Coffee too. Coffee.
Oh yeah, coffee.
That's right. The last thing I'll add is I met Gary's business partner in San Diego a couple months ago, and chatting with them again and again. They're doing the olive oil thing.
Yeah.
And fingers crossed, we're gonna be working with Gary and TJ to help grow their olive oil business with YouTube ads. So
man, that'd be awesome.
I'm just like a little kid, really hoping and praying that we're gonna actually move forward. But I think they're on like a olive oil tour right now. They go to all these crazy places to actually inspect the harvest and probably collect all this amazing footage too that they're going to use in their marketing. So love that guy's stuff. Damn, man.
I'm a little jealous. That sounds great. I hope it works out for you.
I will keep you posted on that. And you never know. Sometimes these things fall through, but fingers crossed. Yeah.
Sweet, man.
Awesome, Dan. Well, really appreciate you being on our show. And it's if anyone listening, we're talking to the 2022 top copywriter in the world right now. It's amazing. So but seriously, fantastic to be able to chat and share your knowledge with everybody. And hopefully you can continue the conversation. And hopefully one day, whether here or in Hawaii, we'll get to share some waves and all that. So looking forward to
man, I hope so. And thank you for having me. This was a lot of fun, to sort of just kind of talk story and let it go wherever it needed to go and not be super serious about it. But hopefully also very valuable for you and all of your listeners.
100%. Fantastic. Thanks so much, Dan. Appreciate it.
All right, man. Have a good one.
Take care. Bye-bye. All right. Well, thank you for joining us for this episode of VidTao Podcast. Again, my name is Ian Nagy, co-founder of VidTao, and really appreciate you having a listen. And it means a lot. So if you have any feedback, go ahead and email us at info@vidtao.com. Love to hear your ideas for future shows, future guests. If you want to be a guest, let us know. Love to chat. Also, just as a reminder, this show has been sponsored by VidTao, which is our free YouTube ad library, VidTao.com. Again, you can go to VidTao and look up over 1 million ads at this point inside of VidTao. They're all unlisted YouTube ads. You can see what your competitors are running, track the results on a day-by-day basis, find new ads inside of our YouTube ad library, VidTao. And we also have a premium edition of VidTao. So the library is free to access, but for full unlimited access to the library, we have a premium edition of VidTao. We also have training from our Inceptly.com agency, which is our sister company to VidTao, where we've managed over $150 million on YouTube. We provide training on media buying, creatives, tracking, copywriting, everything in between. It's all there inside of VidTao Premium. And right now we're running a very special deal on VidTao Premium. And you can go claim that right now at vidtao.com. When you sign up for free, you'll see the offer to join premium and go there and check that out. And last thing, we also do free brainstorm calls with our agency Inceptly. Go to inceptly.com/call. And we love brainstorming with you on your video advertising and just marketing in general. Love to chat. So inceptly.com/call, CALL. Would love to speak with you. So thanks again for joining us and looking forward to the next show. In the meantime, have a great week.